In the field of emotional intelligence, few individuals truly understand emotional depth the way empaths do. As described in Daniel Goleman's work, real emotional awareness is not just about experiencing feelings, but about recognizing them clearly, managing them wisely, and transforming them into inner strength and clarity. There is a truth that may feel uncomfortable yet often reflects reality for highly sensitive individuals. Many strong empaths end up with very few close friends, and in some phases of life, none at all. This is not because they are unlikable or difficult, but because their level of perception goes far beyond what most surface level connections can handle. Their depth naturally filters out anything shallow or inauthentic. Powerful empaths have an unusual ability to notice what others hide, intentionally or not. Their perception is not limited to words. In fact, words are often the least important part of their awareness. They notice subtle signals most people miss: a pause before answering, a shift in eye movement, a forced smile, or tension in facial muscles that reveals inner discomfort. Where most people hear words, empaths read emotional frequency. They sense the atmosphere behind the conversation rather than the conversation itself. These microsignals may seem insignificant to others, but to an empath, they reveal an entirely different emotional layer beneath the surface. This heightened sensitivity often develops early in life. Many powerful empaths grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments where reading moods, anticipating reactions, and sensing tension becomes a form of survival. Over time, this awareness becomes automatic rather than intentional. Eventually, they no longer consciously figure people out. Their system instantly detects emotional inconsistency. Before logic analyzes anything, their inner awareness already signals that something is off. Because of this, deception rarely goes unnoticed. When someone exaggerates, pretends, or hides intentions, the empath senses a mismatch between words and emotional expression. This creates internal discomfort that is difficult to ignore even without clear explanation. Being in environments filled with emotional masking becomes draining. It feels like constant background noise that never stops. Over time, shallow or insincere relationships become exhausting rather than fulfilling. Most social environments operate on partial truth and carefully maintained images. People present versions of themselves shaped for approval or control. But when an empath enters such spaces, people often feel emotionally exposed, even without direct judgment. This is not because empaths criticize others, but because their presence naturally invites authenticity. Emotional honesty requires vulnerability, and not everyone is ready for that level of self-awareness. As a result, some people feel uncomfortable or defensive around them. Powerful empaths also detect contradictions others ignore. Someone may say they are happy, yet their tone carries heaviness. Another may claim confidence, while their body language reveals insecurity. These inconsistencies stand out immediately. Because of this, empaths struggle to accept surface-level narratives. Even in silence, they perceive what is unspoken. This creates emotional distance from those who prefer denial over truth. In many cases, people uncomfortable with self-reflection withdraw from the empath, not due to conflict, but because being seen too clearly feels like standing in front of a mirror they are not ready for. Trust for empaths is not based on charm or appearance, but on alignment. They observe consistency between words, actions, and emotional effort. If they detect manipulation or inconsistency, they rarely react dramatically. Instead, they quietly step back. For them, silence becomes a boundary. Living with this level of perception can feel isolating. Once aware of emotional patterns beneath the surface, returning to shallow interaction becomes difficult. Small talk often feels empty, while deeper topics, emotions, healing, purpose, and growth feel more meaningful. When such depth is unavailable, solitude often feels more genuine than forced connection. Yet this sensitivity is not a weakness. It is also a gift. It allows empaths to sense emotional pain in others without words and respond with understanding before anything is expressed. They create emotional safety that many people rarely experience. However, not everyone can remain in that level of openness. Some retreat when they feel emotionally seen too clearly. This reveals a difficult truth. An empath's awareness is both their strength and the reason certain connections cannot survive. Because of this, they do not settle for superficial relationships. They experience connection on a deeper emotional frequency where sincerity and presence matter more than convenience. Small talk rarely fulfills them. They are drawn to meaning, the emotional stories behind people, hidden struggles, and lessons within pain. For them, emotional resonance creates connection, not proximity. Superficial bonds often rely on distraction rather than depth. Empaths sense this immediately when laughter hides insecurity or agreement masks tension. Staying in such environments feels internally conflicting. Another defining trait is emotional responsibility. They are highly aware of the impact of their words and expect the same awareness in return. When they encounter avoidance, blame shifting, or inconsistency, they quickly recognize imbalance. Because they invest deeply, they operate in full emotional presence. When that energy is not reciprocated, disappointment builds quietly, not as anger, but as clarity that the connection is unbalanced. Rather than lowering their standards, they choose distance. This is often misread as detachment, but it is alignment. They are not superior, they are selective about where their emotional energy goes. Their internal compass values honesty, growth, and genuine care. When relationships are driven by image or hidden motives, they instinctively step back. Their nervous system cannot remain relaxed in inauthentic environments. As they grow, empaths often outgrow relationships tied to earlier versions of themselves. When others resist change or remain emotionally stagnant, distance becomes natural. Ultimately, choosing depth over convenience leads to fewer connections, at times even solitude. But for empaths, this is not emptiness, it is refinement, a process of removing what drains them to make space for what is real. True connection is rare and requires emotional courage from both sides. In a world that rewards appearance over authenticity, their refusal to accept less becomes a quiet strength. Empaths absorb emotional energy constantly, often unintentionally. Because of this, they must be selective about who and what they allow into their inner world. Their sensitivity is not just awareness, it is lived experience. And through it all, they learn one essential truth. Peace is more valuable than forced connection, and authenticity is worth more than approval. They can sense suppressed frustration hidden behind polite smiles and detect sadness lingering beneath someone's "I'm fine." For them, presence is never passive. They are not simply in a room, they are constantly reading it, interpreting it, absorbing it. And in many ways, they are processing far more than what is visibly happening. When someone nearby feels anxious, their own nervous system may subtly mirror it. When a close friend carries grief, that emotional weight often stays with them long after the conversation ends. This mirroring response is not imagined. It is deeply embedded in how their emotional system operates. It allows them to connect with people on an unusually profound level. Yet it also means they are frequently carrying emotions that do not actually belong to them. Over time, this constant absorption can lead to mental exhaustion. Crowded environments become especially overwhelming. In workplaces, social gatherings, or busy public spaces, they are exposed to dozens of emotional undercurrents at once. Each individual carries private worries, hidden insecurities, expectations, and unspoken tension. To most people, this is background social noise. To a powerful empath, it feels like a wave of emotional data all arriving at the same time. Outwardly, they may appear calm, smiling, and socially engaged, but internally, they are working continuously just to stay regulated. Their attention is not only on the conversation, it is also on the emotional climate beneath it. Conflict and emotional drama drain them even faster. When arguments break out or passive-aggressive tension fills a space, they feel it intensely even if they are not involved. The imbalance in emotional energy disrupts their internal stability. They may try to calm situations or offer perspective, but repeated exposure to such dynamics slowly depletes their emotional reserves. Eventually, they learn a necessary lesson. Protecting their peace requires distance from environments built on chaos. Because of this constant emotional absorption, boundaries become essential. Without them, it becomes difficult to distinguish where their emotions end and where others begin. This overlap can lead to confusion, overwhelm, irritability, or sudden withdrawal. Solitude is not just a preference in such moments, it becomes a reset system, a way to clear emotional noise and return to their natural state. Many powerful empaths begin to realize that their well-being improves when they become selective about social exposure. Smaller gatherings feel safer than large crowds. One-on-one conversations feel more grounding than group dynamics. They become intentional about who they allow into their emotional space. This selectivity is often misunderstood by others as distance or disinterest. In reality, it is self-preservation. Just as the body avoids toxins to remain healthy, the empath avoids emotional overload to maintain stability. Their sensitivity also explains why interactions can affect them so deeply. A genuine, emotionally aware conversation can leave them feeling inspired and uplifted for hours. On the other hand, exposure to manipulation, hidden hostility, or emotional dishonesty can linger in their system for far longer, sometimes even days. Their emotional state is often a reflection of the emotional environment they have been in, not just their internal world. With time, they begin to understand a difficult truth. Constant exposure without protection leads to emotional fatigue. As a result, they start valuing peace more than attention and depth more than social quantity. Instead of maintaining a wide network of casual relationships, they often prefer a smaller circle or periods of solitude where their energy can stabilize. This is not detachment, it is respect for their own limits. They understand that if they continuously pour out emotional energy without recovery, they eventually lose clarity, strength, and presence. Powerful empaths also tend to outgrow people quickly because their inner world is constantly evolving. They are deeply reflective by nature. They don't just experience emotions, they analyze them, question them, and try to understand what they reveal. When something hurts them, they don't only react outwardly, they turn inward and study the experience. They ask themselves what it means, what it teaches, and what needs to change. This ongoing self-examination naturally accelerates their emotional maturity, but growth changes perception. As they evolve, they begin to recognize patterns that once felt normal. Friendships based on complaining, emotional dependency, or unhealed trauma begin to feel stagnant. What once felt like connection now feels repetitive. What once felt like comfort now feels limiting. They begin to notice when people prefer staying in dysfunction rather than choosing growth. And for an empath who values emotional development, this creates internal distance. As they set boundaries and strengthen self-respect, not everyone adapts to the change. Some people were comfortable with the version of the empath who overgave, over-explained, and overextended themselves emotionally. When that version disappears, the dynamic shifts, and that shift reveals the imbalance. Outgrowing people rarely happens through conflict. For powerful empaths, it is usually silent. A gradual internal recognition that something no longer aligns. Conversations feel different. Humor feels less connected. Emotional exchanges feel less meaningful. Nothing necessarily breaks, there is just a quiet awareness that the bond no longer matches who they are becoming. Because they process emotions deeply and quickly, they also do not ignore red flags for long. If they sense manipulation, avoidance, or emotional immaturity, they register it internally. If change does not follow, they slowly step back, not out of punishment, but out of clarity. Another reason they outgrow relationships is their comfort with solitude. Many people stay in misaligned connections out of fear of being alone. Powerful empaths, however, often experience solitude as clarity rather than emptiness. They use it to reflect, reset, and realign. This makes them less willing to remain in connections that drain their energy or limit their growth. As they continue evolving, conversations with older relationships may begin to feel disconnected. They may share new insights or attempt deeper conversations, but not everyone is ready to engage at that level. When growth becomes one-sided, distance naturally forms. It is not rejection, it is divergence. Importantly, empaths do not usually view this process with bitterness. They understand that many relationships serve a specific chapter of life. Some connections are meant for healing, some for learning, and some simply for companionship during a certain stage of development. When that stage ends, holding on too tightly can create resistance for both sides. This is why it may appear that powerful empaths have few friendships. In reality, they are simply unwilling to remain attached to connections that no longer reflect their emotional truth. Their loyalty is not shallow, but it is not blind either. They choose alignment over attachment, even when it leads to temporary loneliness, because for them, authenticity is always more valuable than forced belonging. And this is what often defines them most clearly. They feel deeply, see deeply, and live deeply, even when it means walking a quieter path for a while. Yet many people misread this entire way of being. They label it as oversensitivity, emotional distance, or being too complicated. What they fail to see is that the empath's inner world operates on a deeper level than what is visible on the surface. Their processing is slower, not due to difficulty in response, but because they are absorbing far more emotional information than what is being said directly. When an empath pauses before speaking, it is not uncertainty, it is consideration. They are weighing emotional impact, not just words. And when they step away from conflict, it is often seen as avoidance, when in reality, it is regulation. They are choosing clarity over emotional overload. In fast social environments where sarcasm, humor, and quick replies dominate, this reflective nature feels out of place. They may be seen as serious or distant simply because they do not rush into shallow exchanges. What appears as distance is often depth moving at its own pace. Sensitivity is one of their most misunderstood traits. Many cultures mistake it for weakness, but for a powerful empath, sensitivity is precision. It allows them to detect subtle emotional shifts others miss entirely. Hesitation in tone, tension behind a smile, or discomfort hidden in confidence. When they express discomfort over something others see as minor, they are often told they are overreacting. Over time, this teaches them something important, not that their perception is wrong, but that not every environment is capable of understanding it. As a result, they become more private, not from insecurity but awareness. Their tendency to observe more than they speak also contributes to misunderstanding. Empaths enter spaces quietly, listen deeply, and analyze emotional context before responding. To others, this may look like detachment or judgment, but internally they are reading emotional dynamics and assessing safety. Another commonly misunderstood aspect is their calm confrontation with truth. When they sense dishonesty or inconsistency, they address it gently but directly. They do not escalate emotionally, but they also do not ignore misalignment. For those uncomfortable with accountability, this honesty can feel like criticism, and the empath is sometimes blamed for creating tension simply for naming what is already there. Because authenticity is non-negotiable, empaths struggle in environments built on emotional performance. They cannot force enthusiasm when drained, pretend agreement for harmony, or mask their internal state constantly. In spaces where conformity is valued over truth, their honesty is misread as rebellion. Over time, these experiences shape their social behavior. They become more selective with access to their inner world. Deep sharing is no longer automatic. It is earned through consistency, emotional maturity, and trust. Without safety, they hold back. To others, this looks like emotional distance, but it is self-protection shaped by experience. Despite everything, they do not lose compassion. They still try to understand others, even when misunderstood. The difference is they stop over-explaining their depth to those unwilling to see it. They learn that empathy does not require self-erasure. This leads to a deeper shift, self-validation. Instead of seeking constant external approval, they begin trusting their own perception. They accept that not everyone can recognize emotional complexity, and this brings peace. Depth is not meant to be universally understood, it is meant to be felt by the right people. At this stage, they prioritize alignment over approval. They are no longer driven by the need to belong everywhere, but by whether a connection feels emotionally right. Misalignment is no longer ignored for comfort. They also become aware of the emotional cost of self-betrayal. Every time they ignore intuition for acceptance, they feel internal conflict. Eventually, they stop repeating that pattern. Acceptance that requires self-abandonment becomes too expensive. From early on, they notice how often people compromise themselves for approval, laughing without agreement, staying silent when something feels wrong, or pretending comfort. Because they are sensitive to emotional dissonance, these patterns are obvious to them. For an empath, pretending is not just uncomfortable, it is draining. Their system registers misalignment as stress. They learn a core truth. Every time they sacrifice authenticity, they lose internal stability. Choosing alignment means choosing honesty even when inconvenient. It means stepping away from harmful conversations, distancing from unhealthy relationships, and leaving environments built on comparison or emotional noise. These are not dramatic decisions, they are quiet choices for peace. This naturally reduces their circle. Not everyone is comfortable with someone who refuses to compromise truth for harmony. Some misread boundaries as judgment, while others feel exposed by their authenticity. But for the empath, this is not loss, it is clarity. Alignment also requires patience. They do not rush closeness to escape loneliness. They allow relationships to form through emotional safety and mutual understanding. Solitude becomes acceptable, even necessary. What others call isolation is actually refinement. They are not avoiding connection, they are refusing forced connection. Over time, their sense of self strengthens. With less need for approval, their energy shifts toward growth, healing, creativity, and purpose. Boundaries become clearer, standards higher, emotional clarity non negotiable. They stop over explaining. They stop shrinking their truth. They stop negotiating their values for belonging. Not every connection survives this shift, and they no longer see that as failure. Some people were never meant to stay for the full journey. This transforms solitude. Being alone is no longer rejection, it becomes integrity. Proof they are no longer abandoning themselves for connection. They are not disconnected due to lack of warmth, but selective because their inner compass is strong. And ultimately, they understand a simple truth. Real connection will never require them to shrink, silence, or distort who they are. It will meet them where their depth already exists. In the end, powerful empaths are not distant or difficult, they are deeply aware. Their sensitivity allows them to see truth beneath surfaces, feel emotions others ignore, and recognize what is real versus what is performed. Because of this, they naturally move away from shallow or misaligned connections, not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. Their journey often leads to fewer relationships, but deeper authenticity. They choose alignment over approval, peace over chaos, and truth over comfort. And while this path can feel lonely at times, it ultimately brings clarity, inner strength, and emotional freedom. For the empath, solitude is not emptiness. It is protection, growth, and the space where genuine connection is finally allowed to find them.